Greetings everyone, my name is Dominic and today you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today, at long last, I've compiled my top comic book reads of 2024. This has been a video I've been thinking about in the back of my mind all year long. I had so much fun doing this last year, and I knew when end of year was encroaching, it was time to get prepared. Now, if you've been watching some of my other Best of 2024 videos, you'll probably know by now, but just to outline it for everyone else, these are books that I completed or read in 2024, not necessarily books that were released in 2024. That being said, there is still a nice handful of books that did indeed come out this year, so rest assured we still have some contemporary picks here. I should also say there will be a little bit of overlap with this video with some of the other recent lists, but I still also tried to vary my selection, so you might see some here that were not included in other top 10 lists this month, but again, I had so many I enjoyed, so I tried to keep it fresh, and for those that have been watching all of my videos, there's still a good handful of books here that you wouldn't have seen on other videos this month. Okay, and our final note is just a shout out to our channel sponsor, OrganicPriceBooks.com. If you're looking to pick up your own comic book collected editions, perhaps some that are included in this video, I highly encourage you to check out their website. You can find a link for it in this video's description, and if you see anything there you like, you can use my discount code at checkout, TheComicBookReport, to save $2 off of your order. Please note if you use my affiliate link or code to make a purchase, I will earn a small commission, but it's a fantastic way to support the channel. Thanks everyone, now let's go ahead and get started with today's list. Kicking off our best of list of the year in no particular order, we have The Secret Six Omnibus by Gail Simone, Volume 1. This is an oversized hardcover edition coming by way of DC Comics, and this was a particularly fun read for me this year. I picked it up after learning about this team in the pages of the Infinite Crisis Omnibus when I read through that, I believe back in 2023. Anyway, this kind of vigilante mercenary group of characters, think something like the Suicide Squad, and you're not that far off. At any rate, they were assembled during the events of Infinite Crisis to kind of try to be the lesser of two evils, and it was a really interesting and fascinating little mini-series, and that really kicked off this team. Now that miniseries is included at the beginning of this omnibus, along with things like Gail Simone's Birds of Prey, at least a few issues that had to do directly with the Secret Six, and a great handful of ongoing or kind of continuous sequential Secret Six issues, their own self-titled series. This team is led kind of by the Catman, and we have a lot of other great characters in this roster, like Deadshot. At one point we even get Bane, and a couple other characters that are maybe even lesser known, but are still a ton of fun. The revolving roster and just inherent drama with a lot of these characters made this such a captivating read throughout. We do have a couple pencilers attached to this run, but all of their work I felt to be absolutely wonderful. This was a really easy book to kind of binge read, and frankly, it was hard to put down. I've always enjoyed Gail Simone as kind of a generality, but this is definitely one of her sharpest pieces I've had the pleasure of reading. By the time I made it to the last stories included in this omnibus, I was already dreading that feeling that so many other collected edition collectors often feel, which is, oh, when is the volume 2 gonna come out? And while I am still, probably along with many of you, in that waiting game, I'm still so very happy that DC saw fit to release this omnibus, as this is definitely cemented as one of my favorite DC teams of all time. Such a fun read, definitely recommend The Secret Six. Next up on our best of list, Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow by Tom King and Bilquis Evely. This oversized hardcover edition is in fact the deluxe edition that did release this year, 2024. For those that might be longtime watchers of the channel, I did select the trade paperback of Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow as my favorite read of 2023. So yes, this is returning this year as it got a new format, and wow, what an upgrade. In addition to some beautiful chapter breaks, everything in oversized edition, we also have a good selection of extras, and I couldn't miss out on this release. Absolutely wonderful. I love this story. If you're going in totally blank, or perhaps you don't know anything about Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, essentially, yes, it is a great Supergirl story, but really it tells the tale of a young girl who lost her fathers at the hands of a rogue scoundrel who then fled the planet. Teaming up with Supergirl, they jump across the stars trying to find this murderer murderer and bring him to justice or enact their revenge. This is one part coming-of-age story, one part fantasy, science fiction, one part superhero narrative, but it is extremely character-driven and the art is absolutely enchanting. I have never encountered an artist like Bilquis Evely, and the style here not only fits the tone of the work, it just opened my eyes to another aspect of what this medium could provide. I love the character models here, the larger-than-life feel to the whole book, and just all of these different alien cultures and planets and places. It was just such a treat. I think the series is only about 8 issues, but it never overstays its welcome. In my mind, it's near perfectly paced, and that kind of internal narration or exposition we get from the primary character, I just think is absolutely engaging. I was smiling from ear to ear when this came in. It did not disappoint, and now we're just waiting, hopefully someday, for an absolute edition. But yes, this is Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow. If you'd like to see more of my thoughts on this title, definitely check out one of my reviews, whether it was the trade paperback or when I started covering this deluxe edition. Okay, next is our first non-Big 2 book. This is by way of Image Comics. Of course, we're going to be talking about 8 Billion Genies by Charles Soule and Ryan Browne. I've said it before, but one of the hardest things to do as a collected edition comic book reader is sometimes waiting for books to get a collected edition release when I'm hearing that special buzz that sometimes single issue comics get upon release. That was certainly the case here for 8 Billion Genies. I remember, some of the single issue comic book channels I follow on YouTube or online, I would just kind of hear people talking about how great this series was, how much they loved the artwork or the variant covers, and I just thought the premise sounded so interesting. I couldn't wait to get my hands on a collected edition. And the fact that Image Comics saw fit to release this beautiful oversized hardcover, well, I was pretty happy. Collecting the entire series along with a boatload of extras, this was easily one of my favorite books of the year, one of my favorite indie titles of the year. If you don't know, the premise of this book is effectively, what if every single person on planet Earth was given a genie at the same time? This genie would be ready to go, equipped with one wish to grant each of these citizens of Earth and go. That is the near impossible premise that this sets up in its opening pages, but honestly, that's just the beginning of this thrill ride. Intensely character driven and a fun thought experiment given form, 8 Billion Genies is just a dream all the way throughout. Charles Soule is rapidly becoming a writer to look out for me, and seeing him paired with Ryan Browne, it just seems right. I love the art throughout all of this. I thought the characters were all extremely engaging, and I couldn't wait to see where this series ultimately led. And frankly, I wasn't disappointed. With such a brilliant premise, I feel like there was a million ways to get this wrong, and yet these creators absolutely threaded that needle and gave us, in my mind, a modern classic. I loved this series. I had so much fun within this world. This was another one that was honestly very, very hard to put down. And when I look back on my reads this year, it's definitely one I would recommend, absolutely should be included on this list, and one I would try to show people, especially if you want to break out of that superhero comics niche into something a little bit different. Definitely check out 8 Billion Genies. Next on this list, the first Marvel entry, this is Moon Knight by Jed MacKay, Omnibus. This was another title I couldn't wait to hit Omnibus edition. I did read and review the first few issues in trade paperback, and while I liked the series, shortly after that, the Omnibus was announced, and I had a feeling I would really want to sit and invest with that. So I held off reading the rest of the series until this got released, and I had so much fun with this book. I recently reviewed this on the channel. I think I dropped that video maybe in November, but this was so great. Honestly, when I got this in the mail, I think I read this omnibus within about a week. Such an engaging read. We have Moon Knight at a real crossroads in his life. He decides to open something he calls the Midnight Mission, where he can help his community, especially those that travel by night. He's also in kind of a mandated therapy throughout most of this run, and we have him kind of collecting a handful of ragtag characters. Some are returning from the Marvel Universe, some are brand new, created for this run, but he basically has them sort of staff his Midnight Mission, kind of be his allies or friends, and they battle the forces of darkness, the forces of evil. And I think seeing how Jed MacKay both honored the legacy of Moon Knight while also just creating a real new direction for this character, it was just so refreshing. I'm a newer Moon Knight fan, admittedly. I've dabbled with, the Jeff Lemire run, a little bit of the stuff by Bendis, some of the original stuff, and now this, amongst a few other places, but this is easily standing apart as one of my favorite Moon Knight entries I've ever had the pleasure of going into. The art throughout it as well is astonishing. I love the way the artist depicts Moon Knight. It almost looks like he's kind of glowing with a soft white light in almost every scene he's in costume. I think it's really incredible. Another thing I say often on this channel for books I really like, and I can definitely see it here, is that this is an absolutely character-driven series, and that is so fun when you have a character as complex as Mark Spector, the Moon Knight. It should be said as well, I do think this run is a perfect onboarding spot for new readers wanting to check out this character. While there are some plot points, Easter eggs that reflect back on previous runs of both Moon Knight and even Avengers, this is still a perfect place to start, and the creators do a good job of filling in any details you would need to know. Don't miss out on MacKay's Moon Knight. Next up is a book I finally was able to read through and check out this year. Of course, I'm talking about Hellions by Zeb Wells. This is set during the Krakoan age for X-Men and all of the X titles, and this is a run that I always wanted to read through. I had read a few issues in the pages of the X of Swords crossover, and I heard so many people that just thoroughly enjoyed the ride of the whole run. For those that don't know, Hellions is kind of a rogue mutant team in the kind of, again, Krakoan age of the mutants. So this was a really fun, kind of self-contained title in many ways. It was about 18 issues, give or take, and it really follows a misfit band of mutants led by Mr. Sinister. After the ruling council of the mutant nation of Krakoa decides that there are some mutants that are almost too dangerous to handle, Mr. Sinister steps in and says, hey, why don't I make a team that can channel the destructive kind of violent tendencies of some of these mutants for a constructive aim. Of course, we know as the audience members, as probably many of the mutants in Krakoa knew, that Sinister had other motives going into this. At any rate, the field team leader is Psylocke, or Quanon, who kind of oversees these mutants. On the team as well, we have characters like Havoc, who is having his own personal problems, which land him on this team, along with another handful of other mutants. But basically, this team does these very dangerous missions as kind of a cathartic exercise to vent their propensity toward violence and destruction, but Mr. Sinister is absolutely pulling the strings throughout it. There's a lot of tongue-in-cheek kind of comedy, a lot of action, a lot of just outrageous moments. The art from moment one all the way through the end is absolutely some of the most brilliant I've read during this whole Krakoan era, and yeah, what a fun read here. The entire run is collected in this hardcover, including the X of Swords tie-ins, which are so great. Some of the other oversized hardcovers around this time don't include their X of Swords tie-ins, but everything is included from the whole Hellions run in this single hardcover. Such a treat. If you want more details about this run, definitely check out my review of this title. Next on this list, going back to the world of independent comics, we have The Underwater Welder by Jeff Lemire. I believe this book was published by Top Shelf Productions, but wow, what a treat this was. This is another example of a book that did not come out this year, but rather I finally got a hold of it and was able to read it this year, and this left a real lasting impression on me. I honestly almost feel like I'm due for a reread. I really love this book. For those that don't know, this book is all in black and white, and it follows, you guessed it, an underwater welder. This is a real intimate, personal story about a man who had his own dysfunctional father-son issues, who is now on the precipice of becoming a first-time father himself. But while he's doing some underwater welding, he encounters something from his past, a kind of relic that he thought lost to time. This sets off a chain of events that ultimately lead him into a kind of Twilight Zone-like scenario where he feels almost haunted by the memories of his past, as he's trying to make his way back to the present, trying to figure out how to be a father and just to be there. I don't want to spoil too much in this video. I really want people to read it for themselves. If you would like to hear more of my thoughts on this title, definitely seek out my review. I did do a full review of this earlier in the year. But for fans of kind of a surrealism, a character-driven drama kind of story that also has elements of, again, something like the Twilight Zone, where you just feel like everything's a little askew, you go into kind of an almost fantastical headspace when you read it, this is just really amazing. Even months after I first read it, I still can't stop thinking about it, talking about it, and honestly recommending it to those looking for something a little bit different. Again, outside of the world of superheroes. Well-paced and not overlonged, I definitely can recommend it to so many out there. I'll even go as far as to say this really feels like something of literary merit. Really can sink your teeth into this story, these characters, and this world that Lemire so tenderly constructs for all of us. Don't miss out on The Underwater Welder. Next up, from my best of 2024, Predator vs. Wolverine from Marvel Comics. This book was written by Benjamin Percy, who himself has spent a lot of time writing Wolverine of late, especially throughout the Krakoa era, and wow, what a treat this 4-issue miniseries was. This has art by Ken Lashley amongst others, and if you're wondering, it does a fantastic job of honoring both franchises. As a Predator film fan and a longtime Wolverine comic book fan, I wasn't really sure what I expected from this mashup, and yet it delivered everything I might have hoped for. Essentially, Predator vs. Wolverine tells the story of Wolverine in a final battle with the Predator. Along the way in this final battle, we have these flashback sequences, and each issue basically has its own flashback narrative. Within the flashback, we have a different artist every time, but the first flashback takes us back to the first time this Predator ever met Wolverine, long before Weapon X, when Wolverine wasn't even Wolverine yet. He was just a mutant with powers out in kind of the Canadian wilderness. He encounters the Predator and gets locked into this kind of battle for survival. After that, like I said, we bounce around during the Weapon X program, during the time as X-Men and beyond, and we just have this really epic tale spanning, I don't know, close to a century of Predator battling Wolverine. It absolutely didn't disappoint. I was grinning throughout most of this. The art is really, really fun. I love the way that each flashback has a different artist, and then of course we had the wraparound art from Ken Lashley, who I definitely enjoy as well. I think the fact that I enjoyed the Wolverine run by Benjamin Percy and his X-Force run during this Krakoa era, at least what I've read thus far, I knew that he understood the voice of Wolverine in a way I as a reader absolutely enjoyed. When I heard he was penning this story, it was an absolutely done deal. I knew I had to pick it up. This is a great trade paperback collection. I don't think they have it in any hardcover or more prestige format yet, although I hope someday that they do. This is a really, really good one that I would love to see in an even better format. I will say I do have a Barnes & Noble exclusive cover, so if you're looking for this book, you might have a different image on the standard cover. But for those interested, definitely be on the lookout for it. It's a title I highly recommend and one that I really enjoyed this year. Next on this list, from DC Comics Black Label, Aquaman Andromeda by Rom V and Christian Ward. This is a 3-issue miniseries in this beautiful kind of boxy, oversized format. I loved this series. I think people that really frequent this channel might be a little sick of how much this book has made appearances on this channel, but honestly, I just want to keep raising awareness. This was easily in my top books of the year. I cannot stop thinking about it since I first read it. It's basically a psychological thriller, character drama, science fiction work. I don't really know how else to describe it. I think if you've seen that movie or read the novel Sphere, that's the only thing that might be close to what we're looking at story-wise that I've ever encountered. But basically, when an interesting artifact or something is found on the ocean floor, an eclectic ragtag group of people are assembled to go into this submersible, to go to the depths, to seek it out to find what's going on there. Along the way, they encounter an Aquaman that looks absolutely haunting. He has like coral and barnacles growing off of him. His eyes have this really interesting effect. He almost looks like a ghoul in some ways, but he kind of joins them along their search. They have some opposition in the form of Black Manta, who's on the way to this wreckage as well to figure out what's on the bottom of the sea. And yeah, really, really a fun read. A really taut and suspenseful psychological thriller. As I mentioned, it plays with genre in such a fascinating way. Aquaman, yes, he's the titular character. He is utilized, of course, throughout the work, but I almost feel like he's secondary in many ways. This is really about that ensemble team that's going down trying to find what's at the bottom of the ocean. I really enjoyed this. I would absolutely read more like this from DC should we have the pleasure of getting more like this. I additionally really enjoyed it this year because I've been hearing so many great things about the writer Rom V, and I've always wanted to check out work from him, and this was my first opportunity to do so. If you are a fan of Ram V and you want to recommend something from him that I maybe haven't had the chance to read yet, definitely shoot those down in the comments. After reading this and hearing so many great reviews about him, I would love and really welcome more recommendations. Okay, on with the list. This entry is going to take us all the way back to DC's New 52 era. Yes, we are looking at Swamp Thing, the New 52 Omnibus by Scott Snyder and Charles Soule. Earlier in my comic collecting journey, I was reading the early issues of this Swamp Thing run, and I never had the opportunity to finish out the run. And here we are, over a decade later, and I finally had the omnibus in my hand to finish not only Scott Snyder's tenure on Swamp Thing, but also to read and experience for the first time Charles Soule's contribution to our favorite swampy character. Both of those runs are sandwiched together and collected in this one massive tome. Scott Snyder's run on this book, which begins this omnibus, is a straight blockbuster action body horror series culminating in the Rot World event, which was this brilliant crossover between Swamp Thing and Animal Man, where they basically have to fight the forces of the black or the rot that is kind of taking over parts of the world. And after this high-octane body horror adventure, courtesy of Scott Snyder and team, we do go ahead and transition to Charles Soule's time on the book. And what Soule adds to this character was a more familiar touch, at least to me as a longer time Swamp Thing fan. He really delves into a more dark fantasy kind of aspect to it rather than a body horror. Yes, we still have horrific elements throughout Soule's run, but it goes more closely to dark fantasy, which is really my flavor for Swamp Thing. We have a lot more human and kind of intimate stories throughout this run too, I feel, and I just really enjoyed it. And while the first half of the run had this wonderfully kaleidoscopic and graphic kind of art style, again, the second half of this book had a more subdued and again kind of straightforward art style that for me it was a little bit easier to engage with, if I'm honest. Both runs I thought had their merits and were a real fun time to read through. Having them sandwiched together in, like I said, this one massive book is an absolute treat. This was easily on my top reads of the year, one of my favorite omnibuses I had a chance to finish out this year, and it's definitely one I want to recommend to all of you. I don't believe it first came out this year, but you should still be able to find it in print, at least the last time I checked. Okay, moving right along. The next comic collection we'll be talking about today is the Black Cat Omnibus by Jed MacKay. This Marvel comic is one I was kind of passingly curious about, but with the encouragement of Jess over at Omnidog's Vault, I finally just took the plunge and picked up a copy myself. This was a fascinating read. Of course, I had been aware of Black Cat from the pages of Spider-Man for many years, seen her in pop culture and video games, things like that, see her in crossovers, but I never really had a good appreciation or depth of understanding for this character, and I certainly never read Black Cat with the agency she has in this run. This is a fantastic series that is first and foremost a character-driven heist series. Yes, MacKay really plays in the heist thriller genre in this run, and I loved that juxtaposed within the Marvel superhero universe. The way Black Cat kind of brushes elbows with all of these superheroes or villains throughout this run, I just thought was really a blast. There's a ton of humor in this book as well, a lot of great characters, both primary and supporting cast, and it's just a really great read. Between this and the Moon Knight run from him this year, Jed MacKay is emerging as perhaps my favorite new writer that I've had the pleasure of reading this year. This omnibus was a lot of fun, collecting his entire Black Cat run, other than I believe the Dark Web stuff he did with Black Cat, which I think was released after the time of this omnibus. But certainly if you're a fan of the Marvel Universe and you want something beyond just your kind of straight-laced superhero narratives, this is one I could really comfortably recommend. Looking at the art in this collection as well, we have several pencilers that each tried their hand at Black Cat. I think personally and honestly, some artists hit a bit more for me than others, but I never felt like I was pulled out of the narrative because of a shift in art, at least for the most part. And especially because we have that great consistent voice from Jed MacKay writing throughout the whole book, well, it's easy to get immersed in this world. At least it was for me. If this sounds interesting to you at all, definitely check out The Black Cat by Jed MacKay. Next up, we have another Marvel Omnibus for all of you. This is Spider-Man by David Michelinie and Mark Bagley Omnibus Volume 1. Collecting a sizable handful of some great 90s Spidey adventures, this book really took me by surprise. As a long-term fan of Ultimate Spider-Man, I've always been a fan of Mark Bagley's Spider-Man style, but I admittedly had not gone back and read some of his earliest times with Spidey, and we have so much of that collected here in this Omnibus edition. I have already collected the David Michelinie, Todd McFarlane era, as well as his time with Eric Larson, so Bagley was absolutely inevitable. And just as a quick sidebar, I cannot believe how many incredible artists Michelinie was paired with for his tenure on Spider-Man. Anyway, back to this book. So what can you expect from this run, and do you need to read anything else before enjoying it? Well, this is during a time where I think that they do a good job of being fairly episodic in nature, which means I don't think think you need a ton of backstory on Spider-Man. I don't think you have to have read that much else to really just enjoy jumping right in here. I think if you're a new reader or a new Spider-Man fan and this looks interesting to you, you can just pick up this book and get going. It'll fill in a lot of the details you need, and you can always use Wikipedia or Google for more than that if desired. But this book was really fun, and I think one of the more surprising aspects to me for it is just how many great crossovers and cameos we get throughout this run. We have Spider-Man teaming up with people like the Punisher, Moon Knight, Nova, the rest of the New Warriors, Iron Man, Black Panther, and so many more. But we don't just have him teaming up with other heroes or vigilantes, we also have him fighting solo against people like Venom or Carnage, and a good handful of other villains. In fact, it should be said that this actually has the birth of Carnage story in this very omnibus, which is definitely another huge seller for this book for me. If you'd like more information on this omnibus, you can definitely seek out my review on YouTube. I did cover the full book. But don't miss out on Spider-Man by Michelinie and Bagley, one of my favorite picks for 2024. Next on this list, we have the Immortal Iron Fist and the Immortal Weapons Omnibus from Marvel Comics. This, along with the Venom Omnibus by Donny Cates and Ryan Stegman, were my two biggest missed opportunities for 2023. I was really hoping to pick up both of those books the end of last year, and I never really quite got there. So in January, the first books I saved up for were, you guessed it, Venom and this title here. So what is this? This is collecting what many people consider the definitive Iron Fist run. We have work here by Ed Brubaker, Matt Fraction, David Aja, and many other creators. It really spans kind of that early 2000s era for Iron Fist, and I think in many ways it's a perfect jumping on point for new readers or people that just want to experience more for Iron Fist. A lot of this omnibus is concerned around this kind of otherworldly tournament that takes place. Think something like Mortal Kombat and you're not too far off. Beyond that though, we have a lot of great street level stories and some deep fantasy hero stories kind of set in that martial arts other world. Another great plot device or plot point that's used a lot throughout this book is showing us what happened and who were the previous Iron Fists that carried the mantle before our main hero here, Danny Rand. I think that what these creators did to expand the mythos or lore within the Iron Fist universe was really remarkable. I felt like I was getting in on the ground floor of a lot of amazing developments for this character and really the Marvel universe in general. And talk about a book that feels really standalone. I really feel like you can read this book beginning, middle, and end and really not want for much else. You don't really need to know much about this character either. They actually even have a retelling of the origin story within this very book. I will also say for a Marvel Comics title, it doesn't really feel as connected as some other Marvel work. That's not to say there aren't some connecting points and some great cameos from some other Marvel heroes or villains throughout this book. Yes, we definitely get that. But I think because so much is set in that mythical realm of Kunlun and in other worlds, I think that it can feel very separate. It can feel very different, but still real high stakes. This is another book as well I reviewed recently on the channel, so if you'd like more information or more of my thoughts on this incredible book, definitely check that out on my channel. Okay, while a lot of this list wasn't necessarily in any kind of order, I should say at this point, these are my top 2 reads of 2024, and it was a fairly close race. Coming in at second place for me is this book here, The Uncanny X-Force by Rick Remender. This omnibus contains the entire series, and this was my most anticipated book of the year. When I knew my slate for 2025, this was the book I was most looking forward to, pre-ordered pretty immediately when I had the funds, and wow, did this book deliver on all fronts. This was kind of the white whale in the omnibus collecting world, at least for me. I always missed out on when this book was in print. The out-of-print prices were so enormous, at least for me. I knew I would never get there. I almost caved in and bought trade paperbacks over the years, but I'm so happy I stuck it out and finally have an oversized hardcover omnibus edition in hand. This is the Uncanny X-Force, which follows the kind of Black Ops, Lethal Force allowed kind of team within the X-Universe. We have characters like Wolverine, Deadpool, Psylocke, Archangel, Phantom X, and more rounding out this team, and it just never lets up. We have some really fantastic Marvel storylines that are honestly some of my favorite now of all time. I think if people asked me what is the one X-Men or X-based mutant story you'd love to see adapted on the big screen someday, I think I would look at the Dark Angel saga within this run and say this is what I want. I want that right there. I'm just absolutely amazed at what what Remender was able to accomplish within this run. Being a fan of many of the characters included in this book, I will say it has some of my favorite interpretations of characters like Psylocke, Archangel, and perhaps even Deadpool. Really striking stuff here. The art is also something that does not quit. Between the cover artists and the interior artists we get throughout this whole run, it is some of the best and sharpest I've ever seen from Marvel, especially once we get out of the classic era. I should say this run is a bit more violent and probably is more intended for mature audiences, so that should be said, but of course reader discretion advised. If you'd like to see a full review of this title on my channel, I highly recommend it because I just couldn't stop talking about it. Anyway, don't miss out on Uncanny X-Force. And drumroll please, yes it's true, my book of the year 2024 is Venom by Donny Cates and Ryan Stegman, Omnibus. I read this book early on in the year and I remember finishing it and just thinking this might be it. I might not need to look any further. This could easily be my favorite book of the year, and here we are. And yes, while it was a close race for me with Uncanny X-Force, I do think I give the edge to Venom. In my mind, an absolutely essential and character-defining run for Eddie Brock / Venom. The fact that we have so much of this Omnibus too with the incredible pencil work of Ryan Stegman. This man has a way of just creating an atmosphere all his own. The worlds are so immersive and absolutely transfixing. I love that we get not only the full Venom run by Donny Cates, but we also have the main issues of two events, Absolute Carnage and King in Black, wrapping out this whole omnibus, along with a good handful of extras. This book is so good as a one-and-done kind of read. You get a great story and, well, sequence of stories, beginning, middle, and end. We're introduced to new villainous characters within the Marvel Universe, like Null, the King in Black, and we have so much more agency for the character of Eddie Brock. Cates did such a service to this character by making him truly tragic and a character you're really rooting for so much of this run. The end of the book was also so well earned and deeply satisfying for me as a reader. This book was another that was truly hard to put down and one I know is going to stay with me for some time. And like many good books I've read in the past, this left me with that kind of empty feeling when I finished reading it, just knowing that I was never going to get that experience again of reading this exact run, and just knowing that, wow, I really was so satisfied. Even looking at some of the art now, I just can remember my feeling reading these first issues for the first time earlier this year, and I feel pretty assured of my decision here, calling Venom by Donny Cates and Ryan Stegman, Omnibus, my book of the year 2024. Alright friends, and that's going to go ahead and start wrapping up my top comic book reads of 2024. This was such a fun list to compile and put together for all of you. Like I said, after 2023, I knew that this would be something I hope to do for the channel again this year, and it was an absolute delight. Going down memory lane and just looking at some of my favorites I had the pleasure of making my way through, I'm just really thankful for the opportunity I had to read all of these great books. But you'll have to let me know in the comments, what are some of your favorite comic book reads of the year? And also, did you have a chance to read any of the books that I highlighted in the video today? Did you share my opinions? Do you have different thoughts? I'd love to hear all about that in the comments. I'd love to get some great discussions going on some of these books. And more than that, I would like some great comic book recommendations or reflections on some of your favorite reads of the year. Thank you so much as well. If this is the last video you see on my channel for the year, I just want to say thank you for another great year here on YouTube. This community has made this such a worthwhile venture, and I can't wait to see what the new year holds. I had such a blast, like I said again, putting together this list, and thank you so much for everyone who stuck it through and made it all the way to the end. It has been my privilege and honor to present this to all of you today. And again, thank you for watching. This has been the Comic Book Report. Please don't forget to leave your like, comment, and maybe check out another video on your way out. Happy New Year, everyone. See ya.